Michael Horn has over 40 years of experience as a science researcher and began his study and research into the UFO contacts of Billy Meier in 1979. Recently, he posed a question on one of the online forums. What's the deal with the UFO footage released by the Pentagon? Michael is joining us to talk about Billy Meier and the seemingly recent interest being shown by lawmakers in wanting to know as much as possible about the existence of UFOs. Michael, welcome.
Thank you very much, Dale. A pleasure to be here.
Not a problem. It's good to have you here. Well, let's talk about Billy Meier because you've been covering Billy Meier for a long time now, and we're getting a huge influx of new people into the UFO space every day, and I would say the majority of them have no idea who Billy Meier is. So let's talk about him. You know, the who, how, where, and why.
Sure. Billy Meier is now an 84-year-old man, a Swiss man. He claims that his contacts with extraterrestrial human beings began in 1942 at the age of 5. He and his father observed a silver disc flying over their pastoral rural environment. And he asked his father what it was. His father said, "I don't know. It could be a secret weapon from Hitler." The Second World War was just winding down, so to speak. And it was shortly thereafter that young Edward Albert Meier heard a voice in his head, a man speaking to him in his Swiss German dialect yet. And he didn't know what was going on. It was the most unusual thing that had happened so far in his life, his young life. He confided in his parish priest because he was a little shy about bringing this to his own family. The parish priest, according to this information, had also been telepathically contacted by the same voice, the same man whose name was given as Svath, S-F-A-T-H, who would become young Edward Albert Meier's first extraterrestrial contact person. It was shortly after this period of time when he went to the pastor who reassured him, this isn't the devil doing anything to you, that he went out again to play in the woods. He went farther in where there was a clearing in the woods. There was sitting on 3 strut-like legs, a pear-shaped craft with an elderly looking man standing there in what appeared to be a deep sea diver's suit without a helmet. And Meier said he was a benevolent person. I felt no threats, no danger. I approached, we spoke, and that began 11 years of face-to-face and on-board tutoring, mentoring by this man, in which young Edward Albert Meier had his consciousness significantly expanded. His thinking capabilities, by the time he was 7, were already that of a 35-year-old man. He was taken to many places on and off of our Earth. He was shown many things from our very far distant past. And in the ensuing years with Svath, he would be shown things in the future of that time, forward in time, including events that were taking place today as we speak. And he would have these contacts with Svath for 11 years. Then a woman would speak to him in his head when he was about 16 years of age. It would be a woman named Esket. She would do 11 years of tutoring and mentoring, traveling here, there, and everywhere, forward and backward in time as well. And then in 1975, he would begin what are called the official contacts. Now, during this period of time in between, in 1964, he was in India. He took his first UFO photos. People even that know about Meier don't know that he took 80 UFO photos in Switzerland in 1964. He had an album. He was interviewed by a reporter for a very prominent newspaper, the Delhi Statesman. The reporter described some of these photos, a dozen of which remain to this day, including some that he described which are kind of radical. And this evidence would ultimately, in current time, prove to be enormously important to a US military investigator, but I won't get ahead of myself on that. So basically, he loses his arm in 1965 to his left arm. And past that point, 10 years later, he starts to have the official contacts with a third contact person named Semyaze, takes hundreds and hundreds of cleared, primarily daytime, UFO photos, films, video, marvelous stuff up until 1981, when they say to him, no more photo ops. Why? Because we're entering the computer age soon. People will be accusing you anyhow of hoaxing all of this stuff, but we're gonna, stop. You've got enough of that evidence, and we want you to start publishing these conversations. So that's the intro period.
So these conversations, they included prophecies and predictions?
They did. And some of those were presented as prophecy and prediction. Some were simply information that was discussed in the conversations that turned out to be prophetically accurate, scientific, environmental, geopolitical, financial. And that's where I focused after my own introduction, finding this case in 1979 and getting this, the first 1,800 pages of transcripts from the German into English of these conversations that Meier was having with these people. In 1986, I received this big body of information. And in 88, I had my first big aha, which was when I saw a supposedly new scientific discovery from Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories about the connection between the ozone damage and the atomic testing and atomic explosions with specific percentages. I reach under the bed, and yes, indeed, just as I thought, it was already in Billy Meier's information as early as 1975 and actually earlier to 51. So
right.
That's when I realized there's a higher standard of proof than even these magnificent UFO photos, films, videos, sound recordings, all this stuff. And it's this information that no man on earth could possibly have had. We've culled about, well, I like to say 250 or more specific error-free examples of prophetically accurate information where the details are so specific.
And can you name maybe 2 or 3 of his best known predictions?
Well, I'll go right back to 51, where he, at the age of 14, is publishing the first warnings that I have ever found specifically about unnatural man-made climate change, global warming, damage to the ozone layer, the development of advanced beam type weapons and things. There's a whole long letter that he sent around to people. But if we go to the 1958 letter, a mere 7 years later, he specifically foretells 2 US wars with Iraq. They'll be called the Gulf Wars. The second war will be led by a president who will be the son of a former president. It will lead to enormous disasters and terrorism. He foretells in that document the fall of the Berlin Wall. Things such as people carrying portable cellular, phones on them, the use of plastic bank cards, he calls them at that time. He foretells all sorts of strange things, like he says, prostitution will be legalized and taxed. The rise of radical fundamentalist Islamist terrorism will become a worldwide problem. France will ultimately fall to it. Paris, there will be fires and things that are in the news, and we can document even the earliest known English language publication precedes so many of these things. In 1987, he publishes a body of prophecies called the Meier Prophecies. In there, he has some strange and unusual things about Russia is going to move its troops to a place called Arkhangelsk in preparation for its attacks against Scandinavia, as well as Russia and the United States of America will clash. Canada will be drawn into the conflict. Russia will come through Alaska and Canada into the US. The United States of America will have 2 coming terrible civil wars, one following upon the other, and it cannot be helped that the country breaks up into 5 distinct territories under various sectarian dictatorial rule. It goes on and on. Now, when I read that one, which he first actually published in 81 about the civil wars in America, I was with a friend of mine in Los Angeles who was already presenting the Meier case. And I laughed out loud. I said, what is this guy? He's interesting guy, but civil war in America?
Now,
It'll never happen.
Now
and I got that in a...
It's almost happening now.
Well, that's it. He foretold in 1975, they told him that unless things change for the better in the US after 2020, the superpower USA will cease to exist. This will be around the time that the country starts breaking up and the rise of China as the next major superpower. All of this stuff, it's in print. I mean, I'm not laughing about that anymore. I put that out in 2014. I put it on one of my films, and I've published it on my blog since 2013 or so. Civil War is coming to America. And people were writing me, oh, you're crazy. I said, well, it's not me, Billy Meier. So, I mean, there's so many of he was given the information on the largest dinosaur that would be found in Patagonia. I mean, things from the most specific information on Mars. I brought it to a scientist here in the area where I live who works on the imaging for the Mars rover. I came in and gave him 20 or 30. The guy said, could the guy just be a lucky guesser? I said, I don't think so. I mean, Meier's published stuff they haven't even yet discovered on Mars, but the stuff that they discovered, 1976, he's told there will be discoveries of water on Mars and small life forms, small faunic life forms, and that the environment is hostile to life, and all those things have been confirmed. And Meier's information on the water on Mars, where it'll be found, what directions it flows. I mean, my poor friend from the Mars thing, he just couldn't deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Michael, this is all information that's been passed on to Billy from his alien mentors. I mean, who were they? I mean, where did they come from?
Okay, that's a great question. And let me just say that some of the information, unless we can prove the publication of the material beforehand, or we can verify the authentications and analyses and authentication of the physical evidence, I like to say, according to the information in the case. That means things that I cannot prove, far distant past, as yet unarrived future, whatever. So, according to the information in the case, the people that Billy Meier continues to this day to meet with are human beings, virtually indistinguishable from us. They can pass among us and have, whose ancestors go back literally millions of years, highly developed technologically. They gained great kinds of, we could say, consciousness or spiritual powers as well long ago. And then they embarked on, they were Star Wars on steroids warriors. They roamed around in the universe, enslaving people, dominating, doing nasty things because they could, and because some of them really took a hard left turn. And rather than using all of their abilities as the Plejaren, these people are now called the Plejaren, formerly known to people as the Pleiadians. There are no Pleiadians. They straightened themselves out, this race, about 52,000 years ago with the help of other advanced extraterrestrials, to them as well, who were knowledgeable in what's called the creational energy or the spiritual teaching, which is Meier's mission on this world, to bring that forward, as 6 predecessor contactee prophets have attempted in the past. This is the one that takes eventually. So these people have a kind of self-obligated mission, because in some cases their own ancestors were among the gods of our history, prehistory, and set a lot of grief in motion with religions and things like that. So they have come to assist with the final prophet contactee to try to help us to not literally to survive, to assure our future survival. And the events we're dealing with today, in many ways, literally today, are part and parcel of that mission.
Yeah, you mentioned the Pleiadians and the Plejaren, so there must be a strong connection there also with the Aboriginal community in Australia, whose history is pretty much based, or creation is very much based on the Pleiadians.
Well, sure. Let me put it this way: the Aboriginals and perhaps a couple other indigenous people around the world relate to the Seven Sisters star system, because from the direction, there's no life in that seven star system, but the so-called Pleiadians and I'll explain how this name has two, there's two names here, but they come from a star system about 500 light years beyond that, in that direction. It's an altered time space thing, and I'm not a physicist. I don't deal with altered time space. I have enough altered time space going on in the world today. So here's what happened. Meier knew from the earliest stage with his first teacher, Svath, that these people come from a system that they may call the Plejar or the Plejars. And so in 1975, when Semyaze said, we now want you to publish this whole new generation of photographs, these transcripts, and refer to us as Pleiadian. And he said, why would I do that? There's no life in the Pleiades, you're the Plejaren people. She said, well, it's very simple, because we know from future viewings, once you start publishing your information and your evidence, people will come out of the proverbial woodwork. I'm channeling Pleiadians. I'm dating Pleiadians. I'm having Pleiadians babies. I'm a Pleiadian contact. I'm a Pleiadian starseed. All this stuff, they'll all use this term. And then instead of always asking us, because there will be a lot of these people, Billy, as soon as somebody says Pleiadian, then you know they're self-identifying as lying, whether deliberately or not. There are people who imagine things and and they're not out to exploit, as most of the channels and so-called UFO contactees are, because they're not real. They're either deliberately fabricating, or they're delusional or whatever. And that's the thing that's gotten a lot of people unhappy with me in this field of ufology. But that's how the term originated. So in about, I think it was 1998, they said, just go now and use the term Plejar, and there's enough people out there who would discredit themselves ultimately. When people start discerning and working their way through the material, they'll see you have the evidence, and that's the bottom line.
Yeah. So who are some of the, the better known allies that Billy Meier has got and can confirm his evidence and prophecies as genuine?
Sure. Well, there's two things there, the hard evidence and then the prophecies, which I feel are more important, but let's go to the hard evidence. The official investigation began in about 1977 with the late Lieutenant Colonel Wendell Stevens, who had been retired from the Air Force. What people even don't know about him is when he was in the Air Force in 1947 in the United States Air Force, he was tasked officially by the Air Force to investigate UFOs. And he did a lot of that for the Air Force. When he retired, he continued on. And what isn't known is that he was actually in contact with Meier many years before, but we won't touch that right now. That also pertains to the discovery of the 5 remarkable photos that I discovered in October of last year that are unparalleled. Okay, so 1977, Lieutenant Colonel Wendell Stevens, who I had the honor and pleasure to know and to learn from as well, along with his 2 partners in the investigation, a husband and wife team named Lee and Britt Elders. They were very high-level private investigators who worked primarily for banks, Fortune 500 companies. They did counter-espionage, telecommunication security, safe room stuff, and they were skeptics. Now, they knew Wendell was very interested in this, and when he said, hey, I've got this remarkable photo evidence that's come to me, I'm going to start investigating this case, I'm going to Switzerland, they said, Wendell, we'll go with you because you're going to go on a ride, but it won't be on a UFO. Little did they know. So they formed the core of this team. There were other people, Jim Delatoso and Tom Welsh, all these people who had their own credentials and expertise in different areas. And because of that, they were involved in certain areas of examination of hard evidence. But so were scientists at NASA, JPL, United States Geological Survey, McDonnell Douglas, IBM. This was the earlier grouping where they analyzed and examined even the US astronaut, the late Gordon Cooper said, and it's on a film interview, somebody sent it to me, I didn't have it. From years ago, the Russians interviewed him and he said, this man is in Switzerland, is meeting with extraterrestrials, Meier. And then he says, His photos, they're very fine, very fine. They're authentic. I don't know why people accuse him of hoax. This is an astronaut. You know, they're not only trained to sit in a tin can, they're trained, if they don't already have it, photography. They're warned about anomalous objects. He's saying this man meets with extraterrestrials. His photos are authentic. So that's the early body. And then what happened, there's a newer round, if you will, of independent analysis and authentication of Meier's photographic and film evidence that's happened in the last 5-6 years. Probably the most important one to me was what I call an interrogation for 3 months that I underwent conversationally with a man who's called me out of the blue on a Saturday morning, January 2017. I'm Joe, I'm an investigator. You want to talk to me about the Meier case? Sure. Okay, let me tell you right away, I think it's a hoax. 3 months. This guy, real in your face, 8:30 in the morning. Okay, now here's the next question. So, you know, I'm thinking here, well, all right, this is fun, but this guy's really like hard as nails. So he disappears at the end of March, pops back up in August, and he says, okay, I'll tell you who I am, and then I'll tell you about your Meier case, okay? Okay, check your email. That's my credentials. Turns out he was a former top level. I mean, I see these, you know, credentials and testimonials. United States Air Force Office of Special Investigation, investigator supervisor, and background investigator for the United States Department of State. All of those positions tasked with protecting the security of the country, the population, nothing to do with UFOs. He says, okay, you see that stuff? I said, yeah, and I'm looking at it. He says, okay, got a good look? Yeah, delete it. I said, okay. And he says, now, let me tell you, I mean, this guy, a character, really a character. I loved it because this guy's like, the people in ufology, they don't know what an investigator's like. None of them do. This guy's a real investigator. Okay, he says to me. I took 5 months there, 3 months beforehand. I looked into all that stuff. I went back to India, 1964. I checked out that newspaper. It's a good paper. I checked out that reporter. Very good guy, you know, blah, blah, blah. And then I checked out that interview. He's got Billy Meier here. He's interviewing a 27-year-old vagabond traveling around, no money. He's got a primitive old camera, but he's got 80 UFO photos. He's talking about them. You still got a dozen of those photos. I've seen those photos. He said, I have one question for the skeptics. Where did 27-year-old Billy Meier get 80 UFO photos in the middle of rural India? If you cannot document and show me where that evidence came from, this case is 100% ironclad, and I'll take on any skeptics in your behalf. He did. He demolished a couple. One guy named Kevin Randall, who just, he just blew him out of the water.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. This is the difference between ufology and real investigation. And he wrote an article. He spelled out how anybody can go through the evidence, and you use a standard criminal forensic procedure, means, motive, opportunity. I'd written that same thing 8 years earlier, but he fleshed it out because this guy's, he did this. He's hundreds of people. And he said something else to me. He said, after I went through all that, I watched every video of Meier I could online. Let me tell you something. He said, I have vetted hundreds of people. I sit in the room with these people, prominent people, military people, politicians. I read body language. That's the most honest man I've ever seen. Case closed. Okay, Joe. So that, and then there've been 2 other photo and film analyses done using state-of-the-art modern technology. Meier didn't have it. It's a done deal on that level.
Yeah. Well, before we look at the Pentagon stuff, why have the skeptics tried to shut Billy Meier down, and why have they come after you so strongly?
Well, it's nothing compared to what Billy's gone through. Let me just tell you, 23 documented attempts in his life. I've interviewed witnesses to at least 14. I've seen bullet holes. They tried to kidnap his kids at knife point. He's the one that's, his, you know, your arm gets stripped off your body and you still keep on going. Okay. So the skeptics, the reason for that is this. There's a couple. Let me break them down, and you can stop me anywhere you want. A lot of skeptics come from a religious background. They decided to leave behind that religion for the Church of Skeptology, is what I call it. So because they now have they want to be secure in their new cosmology. This can't exist and that can't exist. So even the best ones, which we've demolished, literally demolished, and none of them know what they're talking about. They don't understand science. They don't understand photography. And I'm not an expert in photography, but I've read these analyses. Okay, Why do they go after this? Because it demolishes their worldview, their sense of authority, whatever it is in those people. And it's like the people in ufology, they come after the case too. And they do it because while they're interested in UFOs, everybody's interested in UFOs now, but no, they don't know anything. They have no, it's like phenomenon. And this is all tied, this is a deliberate thing we have to go through in terms of this case. And Billy was told about this long ago.
Yeah.
So it leads to why it's suppressed. And, but let me, I know you want to say something, so let me stop right there.
Yep. I find that those skeptics and debunkers that come after people like Billy Meier and even Stanton Friedman, you know, years ago, generally have been put up to it by more sinister forces behind the scene. Would that be the case here?
According to the information in the case, there are people who, first of all, some of the people that have come after Meier, literally shooting at him and everything else, came, either they were very fundamentalist or, you know, fanatical religious. Some were definitely through secret military or secret services. Meier knows that. And you mentioned Stanton Friedman, who I knew, very nice man. But here's what happened with him. Back early on in the case, around 1980s, he wanted in. He knew Wendell Stevens, and this is documented. And he wanted to come in to be part of the whole analysis and investigation. And Wendell said, no, I'm not having anybody from ufology in this. This is all going to be handled and analyzed by scientists who are credible, and scientific institutions. We're going to have enough trouble with ufology. No. So he turned against it. I ended up debating Stanton Friedman several years back on a radio show, and they took a listener poll. He was trying to attack he didn't know anything because he got so angry that he never learned really what was in there. So it was a 98% to 2% readers poll, and people knew he didn't know what he was talking about. It's too bad, because I met him up in Canada, you know, a couple of years before he passed, and just a like grandfatherly guy. And like he even said, you know, well, we can disagree without being disagreeable. I said, of course we can. But yes, there's a guy named Cal Korff. There's strong, let's say, evidence, circumstantial evidence that he has been assisted in his rather vile attacks against the Meier material by other parties. And this comes to the question of the Pentagon. If you want, I mean, I can make that jump now or wait for anything else you want to.
Well, this might sound strange, but I kind of find it comforting that someone's had an attempt on their life because of what they're preaching or teaching, because it kind of confirms the truth. It kind of confirms what they're saying is true.
You got it. And I'll tell you something I've just learned a couple of days ago. You know, I have a website and I have a blog, and I have a lot of activity on my blog. I've personally published about 1,250 articles on my blog and a couple hundred more on my website. And we know from my friend who does it, I don't follow this stuff with search engines, there's DuckDuckGo and all these other things. And we're like #1 on Google. We're down at 123. Why? It's right there.
Yeah.
They don't want, look, I get attacked by certain people. I've had hundreds on, even going back years. I've gone into forums and people tell me things about me that I don't know where they ever got them, and they call them. It's because we're dealing with something quite real that's very uncomfortable to a lot of people.
Yeah, that whole search engine thing. I mean, that's a whole nother discussion. But we've seen evidence of the shenanigans going on there before the recent election. Michael, so let's move on to the Pentagon. And,
sure,
you know, this perhaps ties in some way, but your question, and, you know, what's the deal with the UFO footage released by the Pentagon, and why are we seeing it now?
Right. It's all tied. We can, you know, take a needle and thread through all of these things. The Pentagon footage, such as it is, looks like a 1970s, you know, version of a video game, the little thing jumping around. I try to explain to my friends in ufology, the Pentagon is not here to let you in on secrets. neither is the CIA. When the Pentagon and the CIA start revealing things, watch out.
Watch the other hand.
Watch the other hand. Now, if you've seen that Pentagon thing, and you look at Billy Meier's 1970 films, 35, 8mm films, his films of these craft are crystal clear. And of course, which begs another question, how did he ever know where to be to take 1,200 films and photos and all that? So here's Meier's crystal clear. In some cases with photographs, he's within 15, 20 feet of the craft, and you get this silly, grainy, stupid thing from the Pentagon. Oh, now remember, if you go back and look at the articles that came then and from the Pentagon and other people in intelligence, they're talking about threat assessment and the violation of our airspace. It's here and there, it's thrown through these things. You get it from Lou Elizondo, who's with this nonsensical To the Stars Academy, and Mellon, Christopher Mellon, former spook banking guy. This is to perpetuate the original agenda of the evil alien from last century, when Orson Welles, the actor, came out and did the presentation of H.G. Wells, they weren't related, War of the Worlds, which has been, I'm gonna have to just shut this noise up, which was done, War of the Worlds was a radio broadcast first in the film.
1930s,
this was to create fear because the United States government and even the Roosevelt administration of that time knew that there had been other objects. It goes back to the First World War during the Wilson, Woodrow Wilson, First World War. These things were being sighted over the battlefields. Each side thought the other side had a secret weapon. And then when they realized this didn't belong to anybody on Earth, there was a conspiracy of silence started then. So this is all connected. Now we get War of the Worlds and all of that mid last century. And the control elements on this world are what? Military, industrial, political, religious, corporate, media. All of those entities would suffer loss of control if the fact that non-hostile, intelligent beings live in this universe and have dropped in to take a look. So they have to demonize them, and they use the Roswell crash to set up the so-called evil gray aliens. This is all tied together. Roswell those were androids. They were not extraterrestrial human beings. These were the little creatures that went on the exploratories for the people in that system. When the Pentagon puts that thing out and starts talking about opening up its archives, what they're doing is they're feeding some poor people in ufology, like John Greenewald's got the Black Vault. He thinks he's just been let in on the big secrets of the universe because he's downloading digital toilet paper from the CIA. All of this stuff is meant to direct people to the agenda they want people to follow. They know the Meier case is real. The CIA had an outpost above Meier's property for years in an abandoned, a former Swiss military thing. I drove by it 100 times if I drove by it once. And they even told one of the investigators in the case they had photographs of the craft coming in and out of Meier's area. So this is where the fear is, because there is still the possibility of a fake ET attack. When the Pentagon comes forward now in the Senate and the Congress, 6 months, you got to tell us, because they're worried also. They know that the social order is breaking down in the country. If it's time to play the evil alien card at some point, that'll be to do a kind of martial law thing. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I asked Meier about this 10 years ago.
I mean, the fake alien attack, isn't that kind of along the same lines as what Dr. Stephen Greer talks about?
Well, Dr. Stephen Greer, I presented in about 2000, it was between 2004, 2006, we were at the same public presentation on a panel. I stood up and I offered him everything in the Meier case. I said, Stephen, why don't you, we'll give you this body of work, all the evidence, all the witnesses, stuff. You don't have to parade people around. All the people he's got, well, we saw this thing, they're telling what they saw, but they don't know what it is, because most sightings are secret military craft. So he built, he's a huckster. I'm sorry, I'll tell it to him to his face. I've tried many times. this is more profiteering, fake alien babies and free energy, and send us your money. He doesn't have one piece of evidence of anything, a verifiable extraterrestrial origin or manufacture. And so he sells fake ET ambassador trainings, $800. Come out to the desert and shine your flashlight for aliens on demand, because everybody's buying into this little gray thing or non-existent reptilians. And this is the disinformation that directs people away from the singularly authentic Billy Meier case.
Okay. Speaking of evidence, so the Pentagon's been given 6 months as of, I think, the beginning of January to disclose what it knows about UFOs. So it should be about July, but I'm tipping all we're going to hear is crickets. I mean, do you believe we'll hear anything new?
The UFO cover-up, people will disagree, but wait till you go do the evidence search, is solely about the Billy Meier contacts. Why do I say that? Because this is still ongoing in Switzerland, where these meetings take place on a regular basis now, even more regularly than before, because of the things we're going through in the world. We're never going to get the truth. Here's another thing. You've heard of Seti, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. It's an organization whose name tells you that that's what they're about, except they're not. Seth Shostak is an astronomer there. For 10 years, we've provided information to him and Seti. He's done nothing but write back to people with dismissive, nonsensical stuff. I've published articles about it, and recently we got all this stuff from him. Some people wrote him emails so they could get on record his ridiculous responses. And then a few days back last week, I posted an open letter to the director of Seti, Bill Diamond, and I said, here is all this factual evidence. We'd like your response. It's time that Seti reveals that they know that the Billy, just as they do at the higher levels of the military, not most of it, but the higher levels, the Billy Meier case is authentic. It's ongoing now. Come clean.
I'm not being mean, but I kind of laugh at the Seti thing, because I mean, they're pointing telescopes out to the universe, hoping to pick up signs of life, and they've got millions of experiences here on this planet alone who have met, and have got, you know, more than a story or two to tell about ETs on this planet.
Here's the problem with that, and this is where I say this with all due respect to everybody, and some people don't deserve it, but I'll say it anyhow with due respect. None of those people that to date that I've come across in terms of their claims, who've either contacted me or I've been at events, these people, not one of those people would stand 3 minutes with Joe Tisk, because they don't have evidence. They have claims, they have their beliefs, they have their hallucinations. Now, that doesn't mean that people haven't seen lights in the sky or craft, and it doesn't mean that those craft are or are not extraterrestrial, but none of those people are being contacted. And I've run this really quickly by people for some time. Any actual extraterrestrials coming to this country, coming to this planet from the depths of space, have to be highly developed technologically, but something else. They have to be relatively, compared to us, long-lived, hundreds of year lifespan, because the development of true extra, solar system travel, wherever you live in a solar system, we're throwing tin cans at the moon and tin cans at Mars. We're not in outer space. Our probes eventually may get there, but we're still in the solar system. Here's the thing. Those people coming here who've developed all this technology, everything, do you really think they've come here to drop down to talk and meet and give experiences to people who don't have any capabilities to do anything with the kind of information such as Billy Meier's received of scientific nature? None of these people have ever been contacted by the president or the premiers in their countries, the vice president, high-level judges. No, their mayors don't call them up for any reason. They don't even get a call from the dog catcher unless their dog is loose. But we are supposed to accept on face value, oh yeah, I had an experience with a Nordic or a tall white, I'm an Andromedan contactee. Really? Contact the confirmed existence of an extraterrestrial race would be the most important discovery in all of human history and science, superseded only by contact. That's monumental. We don't even have any of our scientists, with the exceptions of the ones who gotten into the Meier case and are saying, yeah, this is true. I dismiss all that, nothing personal, but I know what Billy Meier has gone through to try to bring this to the thick-headed people of this world. I know how hard that is. Mm-hmm. So don't just float forward like a lot of them do. I'm going to speak at this event. I've got a book out about my contacts. You put evidence on the table, I'll be glad. I know a lot of other people are glad to look at it, but otherwise, why don't you go away? So I have called out the entire field of ufology as a field that has done as much damage as the governments and the things like the Pentagon and all, because they've misled so many people. As you say, look at the size of these UFO groups now online and elsewhere. They think this stuff is real, but they don't know about the Meier case. You know, bang, bang, bang.
Yeah. So yes or no, do you think we'll see any new evidence emerge from the Pentagon in July?
There's anything short of admitting and bringing forward Meier's evidence is irrelevant, because what else can they do? Now we have reports from here, and it appears that some, I'd watch out for that, because don't forget, the government, it's tied into the Pentagon. These people on these committees and everything else, they get kickbacks for approving funding, and it's an insidious thing that has nothing to do with the truth. You want the truth about the Meier case? It's free. Any of your viewers or listeners that want the best UFO film ever made is called The Silent Revolution of Truth, in my opinion, because we filmed it 2006 and 7, put it out in 2008. I'll send it to you for free, for free. You're not going to get that from the Congress or the Senate or the Pentagon. You're going to be lied to again until they either come out and say, we can prove the Billy Meier case is a big hoax, the longest running, most impenetrable hoax in modern history, or yes, it's true. And there's some folks, they won't meet with us, but they're trying to help us, because we're about to suffer such huge losses on this planet from wars, terrorism, and to say nothing of this disease that they've been warning us before we knew all this stuff. They're plopping it down for free. Mm-hmm. But no, we're going to control the narrative, because we can make more money out of that.
Michael, for people who are interested in getting a copy of the video you just mentioned for free, where can they go?
Well, I'd like them to go to my blog, which is theyflyblog.com, to see it. And my website is theyfly.com. The blog has got more stuff than the website. And then there's a contact for me. You can write me, michael@theyfly.com. You send an email. You can say Dale, or you can say for free or film, just 1 or 2 words, so that I know that you watched the show. And then I download it to you. I don't sell your email address. I don't try and get you to buy anything. And then you have access to all of this free stuff, unparalleled. Stephen Greer doesn't have it. He can't sell it to you to make a buck off of it. Yes, I will sell books and films, because I've produced these films at my own cost. Billy Meier has published books at their own cost. If you want the higher level stuff on the spiritual teaching, creational energy material, so you can learn what these people study and what they want us to study, so we can rise to that level. Yeah, and there's plenty of that free stuff there too. You don't have to buy anything. Learn, read, don't get sucked into this stupid ufology trap. That's my thing. Look, I've been a target of these attackers for a long time. It's fine. They're going to continue. I don't care. I started 42 years ago to find out if this was true. I tried to trick Meier 4 times in 3 years, because he gave me an answer to a question. So I came back next year and the next year, same question, same answer. Oh, no, nothing. Bing, this guy's telling the truth. And then I could validate it through the physical. I'm an eyewitness. There's over 100 of us. I've been within 20 feet of a small craft. That stuff isn't important. It's interesting. It's not important. The UFOs get you into this, and then you have to go, okay, what's the higher standard of proof? What are the prophecies? What does it mean to me? That's how I view it, and I'm glad to send that film.
Okay. Michael, thanks for your time. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you. I've been meaning to do it for some time now, but I hope we can talk again soon.
Anytime. Dale, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
That's Michael Horn joining us today.